So what is active learning? Active learning are instructional activities involving students in doing things and thinking about what they're doing. So this was coined by Bonwell and Eason in 1991. Others have come to the forefront to give their own definitions. And so another definition is active learning engages students in the process of learning through activities and/or discussion in class, as opposed to passively listening to an expert. It emphasizes higher order thinking and often involves group work. Another is active learning is also commonly associated with inclusive teaching. It has been empirically shown to decrease the achievement gap for underrepresented minorities and first-generation college students, particularly in STEM fields, to reach a diversity of students and to build higher order thinking skills across engaged students' populations. Active learning therefore can help improve class climate by promoting interconnections between students, which can enhance the sense of belonging and motivation for marginalized students and those with differing levels of academic preparation. So why in Center for Teaching do we promote active learning? And why did we make a video about active learning and online teaching? Well, the first figure you see here is from Freeman et al. In 2014. It's one of the most famous figures accompanying active learning pedagogy. And what you're looking at is the number or the percentage of students that failed courses. So we're talking about sample sizes in the tens of thousands of students here. These were very large studies done between students that were in a lecture-based only class and students that were in active learning-based classes. Now remember, we're measuring failure rates here. So even though the active learning is down, what you're actually noticing here is less students are failing the course when they are paired with active learning pedagogical techniques. So in lecture-based courses, up to more than a third of the students fail the course, whereas with active learning, that failure rate decreases by 50%, and just over 20% of the students failed the course. So much improved measures in terms of the number of students failing, which means so many more students were successful. And then if we were to look within those students who are passing, B's become A's, C's become B's, and so on and so forth, helping GPA, helping scholarships, helping transfer, all sorts of different things. So we don't just look at failure rates. The biggest gains that we actually see are in students who are historically marginalized. So historically marginalized students, we know, have a gap not only in their prior education, but in the percent passing our courses. So what we're looking at here is another treatment of passive, which you can put in the word lecture there, and that would work, versus active learning. And so the gap in percent passing here, we're showing a narrowing of the gap with active learning. That gap is lessened, again, by about 50%. And that is huge for our students. So if this is something that we can do to not only help them pass, but also help them do better in their courses and reduce the education gap for historically marginalized students, this is why we promote it so much in Center for Teaching. So what are some examples of active learning? We'll have links to all of these examples and more on our Center for Teaching website, which is ctcft.org. But using discussions in your courses is active learning, provided that they are talking with each other and they are also doing some reflection within that work. Using case studies, jigsaws, quick writes, virtual gallery walks, dot storming and/or Jamboards, using a four corners process, problem-based learning, community-based learning, gamifying your course using think, pair, shares, and presentations. All of these can actually be used in either asynchronous or synchronous courses such as an LRON or a HighFlex. And so the links in Center for Teaching website will actually go through how to do these in online modalities. In our live remote courses, we want to make sure to stay as active as possible. And there's a number of different reasons for this. The first is students get burned out very easily. There's a lot of time spent on screens right now. And so one of the best ways to do this is to be a guide on the side for students, not a sage on the stage, so avoiding long lectures when you're teaching LRON courses, and instead engage in multiple different types of active learning when you have students live in front of you. And that's the guide on the side. So you are actively acting as a learning manager, not so much as just distributing information to students. Also keep in mind that students are often in multiple LRON courses, and so this is a very large and heavy cognitive load for them to be doing all of these hours in LRON courses over the course of a week, much less a semester. So the more that you can put on them to stay active during these times, the more that they're going to actually stay engaged in your course. Also, attention spans. So the research shows that students' attention, whether they're in person or online, is going to wax and wane. This could be for 5 minutes they're paying attention and then they drift away for a couple of minutes and then they come back and they're paying attention. The hard part for us is that students are going to wax and wane at all different times. So student A is going to be waning when student B is waxing, and so on and so forth. So you may not have all of your class, quote unquote, there with you at the same time. Research has shown that the waxing and waning cycles is minimized with active learning. So if you can get more of your students to pay attention at the same amount of time because they're all on task with a learning activity, you're not going to lose multiples of them at varying times, and they won't know what's happening in the course. Active learning, going back to this idea of attention span, engages, but it also refocuses. So especially if you're doing short amounts of learning activities, something that won't take an hour and 20 minutes, but something that will take 15 or 20 minutes, and then re-engage them with something else that's related and re-engage them with something else. It helps keep them on task, helps keep them engaged with the topic and the material, and it also helps them to learn that material in new and different ways, which helps different parts of their brain connect with other parts of their brain, and it solidifies that learning all that much more.
So you've heard about some specific strategies for integrating online learning, and just a reminder that you can get more information about those strategies in some of the resources that we'll provide along with this episode. And you've also heard about how this plays out in an LRON, a live remote online environment where you're meeting students in real time. These same principles apply, but they play out in different ways when your class is asynchronous, when there are no required live meetings. So first of all, you want to structure classes with active learning in mind. So as you review your lesson or your unit, you want to look for the opportunities to give students a chance to reflect, to maybe weigh in on a concept or an issue, to apply a course concept. You also want to vary those activities so that they're not too predictable, right? We all have our shtick, and that works well for a while, but if we do it too often, it becomes a little too predictable and becomes almost kind of stale for our students. TJ's talked about being a guide on the side versus being a sage on the stage. And as you're planning for that in the asynchronous environment, when you're not there to literally in real time guide them through, you need to think about that slightly differently. So first of all, introduce your objectives and offer your overview. I often do this. We talk about this in our Dissolving the Screen video. by giving a short video introduction to the class, maybe even just 2 to 3 minutes, where I talk about what we're looking to accomplish, what I'm particularly excited about, kind of what to watch out for, what to stress in this particular unit. Provide a to-do list or an outline. So I literally will have often a little checkbox list, and my students report to me that they copy it into Word docs or print it out and then literally just check off as they go. So it's helpful to help students kind of make their way through and know what's expected. Include your why. So as you're including all these great active learning activities, make sure it's going to be clear to your students why they're there. They're not just going to feel like fun add-ons, or maybe not so fun add-ons, depending. Help your students to navigate and chunk the class. So in other words, set that course folder up so that there are some key points where students can naturally sort of realize, oh, I can go grab a cup of coffee now, or I can get lunch or take a walk or just step away from the screen for a few minutes and come back to this later. Emphasize your expectations clearly and estimate time on task. So this becomes particularly important in the online environment. Students, we all know, sometimes have a tendency to overweight or underweight assignments or activities. In the online environment, that becomes even more of an issue because you're not there to say, no, that's not that big of a deal. Or no, I need you. No, you're not. No, group 3, you're not done yet. That should take longer, right? So within the limits of, we all vary here, right? So I always say to my students, your mileage may vary, but I'd like you to spend no more than 5 minutes brainstorming. And really, this should be off the top of your head. Or free write for 5 minutes about this. Or take a quick poll about your thoughts about X. On the other hand, I might say something like, really the majority of your time in this unit should be spent on this research proposal and really understanding how you're going to integrate your sources. You want to tie back to prior knowledge in helping your students to stay active in the asynchronous environment. So remind them of how this connects with previous concepts you've studied. Let them access the knowledge of this topic maybe they had prior to the class, or the experience they've had with it, or what they've observed about it. And then you want to make sure when you can to highlight and synthesize student contributions. That's really a great way to both dissolve the screen, as we talked about in another episode, and also to encourage more active engagement. So this is relatively simple, right? Highlighting particularly astute contributions on the discussion board, noting a thoughtful question, looking at something that I've noticed that a lot of people are struggling with, or a lot of people made the really good point that, so those kinds of things. So let's look at how this plays out in a particular class, one of mine. And this is from a media writing class that I teach, where students are writing for the student media. I've already in this unit done a video introduction, as I discussed. I've given them their checklist. They know where we're headed. They know the objectives. And then this opens with a short active learning activity, which is also going to tie back to prior knowledge. So in the prior unit, they were writing tweet-sized micro news stories. And in this unit, they're going to be pitching a news brief. So I'm saying, hey, you just wrote these micro news stories. Go back and look at what your classmates have written and choose what you think are the 3 best contributions. Or 3 of the best. So to take some of the pressure off that these are the only 3 that are good, right? And then reply and quickly, based on what you've learned so far, what makes them stand out as being particularly newsworthy? How do they reflect successful reporting? And then I leave them right here, helping them to navigate, right? Chunking, here's the discussion board where you can do that. Following that is kind of is additional information that will deepen their knowledge and help them with the major activity of this particular unit. So review something we've already written, and these are all short kind of one-pagers. I'm telling them, here's a new reading, here are a couple of questions you want to carry with you into this reading that will be helpful to them as they're going to do the major assignment. Here's my quick notes, just a couple of short paragraphs, and then there are a couple of short readings. And finally, again, highlighting student contributions. I'm asking them to look at news briefs students have written in the past and that have been published, and just kind of have a sense of how that might be done, so how that looks in the wild. Then they come to another short video of me, and in this video I'm explaining how they're going to be pitching their news brief, which will be a 1-minute elevator pitch, the process they can use to kind of make their ideas behave, and then giving them some specific tips. And I might also in this particular video, I'm highlighting some of the questions students have already raised or some of the trial balloons they've thrown out on the discussion board prior. finally, we end with active learning. So they actually make their news brief. We're using Flipgrid, which is integrated with our Microsoft Suite for all the Connecticut community colleges. They use their student login that they use for student online services for MyComNet. And they go right into Flipgrid, which I've also embedded in Blackboard. So again, the one-stop shopping, helping with navigation. And then they do their 1-minute video here in Flipgrid. And finally, they conclude by responding to one classmate also in video. So I want to tackle now the matter of some debate and discussion in teaching and learning circles, and that's whether or not to require video in your live class sessions. And we'd like to highlight some equity and inclusion considerations for you to contemplate. We need to think about what kind of workspaces our students might be learning in. For some students, that's going to be a corner of a table, a corner of a room, sitting on a bed. Not everybody's going to have a dedicated, quiet workspace they can work from. We need to think about the varying levels of internet access and quality of bandwidth that our students may have, particularly if there are multiple people in their home doing some sort of online learning or work. It's important to consider our students' desire for privacy, right? But some students just don't want to bring you into their home. We got to think about our introverted friends, our more introverted friends. So they may not, it might be a really heavy lift for them and really depleting for them to stare into a camera and feel like people are able to see and look at them for an hour and 20 minutes or 50 minutes or even longer if you're doing a once a week LRON class. You remember that I mentioned Flipgrid earlier, which is video based, but Flipgrid allows students to make some really conscious decisions about how much they show of themselves. They can split between themselves and a screencast. They can frame the environment in different ways. And also in Flipgrid, it's a relatively short video engagement and it's completely under the student's control. They have time to compose it. And then we're out of their space, whatever space they're sharing with us, when they're done with us, right? When they're done doing what they have to do. I'd also just want to highlight something from the Hope Center's National Real College Survey. Now, this survey was done a couple of years ago. So this is pre-pandemic, obviously. Out of the 86,000 college students surveyed, 56% were housing insecure in the previous year, and 17% had been homeless. So that means over half of the students in your class potentially have experienced some sort of housing insecurity. And that was pre-pandemic. We can only assume that with the economic challenges and the disruption of the pandemic, those figures are actually probably worse. So we need to be conscious of those issues and really be mindful of what it might mean for some students if we require them to be on video. So of course, we understand that part of requiring students to be on video is making sure that they're staying engaged and that they're actively participating and attentive. So you say, how am I supposed to teach to a bunch of blank boxes? So let's look at some other ways you can encourage active engagement throughout the class without video. Invite your students at the beginning of the semester to find a photo they like. You know, most of our students are on social media and they have photos they like of themselves, and make that kind of their set photo for when they're not on camera. If they're uncomfortable with a close-up of their face, maybe they want to use another image. Maybe they're going to use a Bitmoji, or they have a particular character that they want to represent them. That way, you and the students are not just looking at blank boxes with a name at the bottom throughout the class. Think about how you can leverage audio contributions. Use the hand raise function and have students weigh in that way. So just a quick anecdote. I had a class where students were working with me on sharing story topics, and they had the option to do it asynchronously through Flipgrid or synchronously through live Blackboard Collaborate. And I went on camera, and none of the students that were at the live session were on camera. And I was like, oh, come on, you guys. I can't, this isn't fair. And I tried to go off camera. No, we want you on camera, but we don't want to be on camera. We're so depleted from being on screens, basically. So interestingly enough, that was a really excellent discussion, and none of them ever went on camera. They used the hand raise function, and they gave their contributions via audio. When there was a little bit of us all adjusting to figuring out who was speaking when, but we figured it out, and we had a great discussion. So that can be a really robust way to continue the conversation. Use the chat box liberally, right? Ask a question and wait for a few folks to weigh in. Do an instant survey, a poll, a word cloud to kind of get the pulse of the class and keep everyone engaged. And if you see only a couple contributions, say, hey, listen, I've only heard from 3 people so far. I need more. And really and make that sort of one of the ground rules for the class. Make them understand that you're going to be doing that over and over again. Think about some other quick, low-stakes activities that you could use. TJ went over a bunch of them earlier on in this, and we'll provide more resources, and we'll talk more about low-stakes activities in another episode. So as we wrap up our work with this episode, engaging and energizing your online classes, we'd like to give you a chance to do some active learning. Consider a lesson or unit in one of your current LRON or online classes, so synchronous class or asynchronous class. And with that lesson or unit in mind, or maybe in front of you, ask yourself, where and how does this particular class session, this unit, this lesson, encourage active student engagement? What's the purpose of that active learning? What does it accomplish? And have you communicated that to your students? Do they know why you're doing this activity? And then ask yourself, is there a way that you could encourage even more of this active engagement? Is there an opportunity for another little activity, for a tweak you could do, for a quick check-in, for a very quick low-stakes activity that would give students a chance to step back, reflect, apply, discuss, debate, share ideas about? And then you can repeat as often as you need for as many lessons as units as you'd like.